For 50 years, David and I built a life, a family, and a company rooted in integrity. So when our son Julian turned David's funeral into an exclusive, ticketed event, charging me to say goodbye, it was a wound deeper than grief. He thought he had control of everything, but David had a final, devastating secret waiting to be revealed. And I was the one holding the key. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening. And let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. The silence in the house wasn't just quiet. It was a hungry, echoing thing, swallowing every memory David had left behind. 5 days. 5 days since David's final breath. And the world had muted its colours, its sounds, leaving me, Clara Vance, adrift in a sea of unspoken grief. Our home, once a symphony of gentle rustles and David's low, comforting hum, now felt like a stage after the final curtain call, bathed in the stark glow of morning sun through the kitchen window. The only sound daring to break the stillness, my porcelain teacup, still steaming with the Earl Grey David used to tease me about, felt strangely heavy in my hand. I traced its rim, the warmth, a fleeting comfort against the cold dread settling in my chest. The kitchen table, polished smooth by years of shared meals and whispered dreams, now held an empty chair. David's chair. It sat there, defiant, a ghost at my breakfast. I tried to focus on the budding spring outside, the first shy blossoms of the rosebush David had planted. But my gaze kept drifting back to that void. Breathing felt like a conscious effort, each inhale a struggle against an invisible weight. My mind wandered back to those final days, David's hand so frail in mine. "Clara," he'd whispered, his eyes still holding that familiar spark. "Take care of things. You always know best." I'd squeezed his fingers, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Our son, Julian, had visited? Of course. Julian, all sharp suits and polished ambition. A man I sometimes felt I barely knew. He'd leaned over David, a perfunctory kiss to his brow. "Father," he'd said, his voice flat, "I'll handle everything. Don't you worry about a thing." Then, almost immediately, he'd stepped back, pulling out his phone. "Yes, the merger," I'd heard him say, his voice rising, already absorbed in his world. A world David had painstakingly built for him. I'd wanted to believe Julian would honor David, truly honor him, not just some abstract idea of his legacy. The shrill ring of the landline jolted me, making me flinch. A violent sound in this quiet, sacred space. I let it ring, twice, 3 times, a frantic intrusion. Finally, I reached for it, my fingers stiff. "Clara, dear?" "It's Sarah." Her voice, a warm, familiar blanket. "Just checking in. You haven't forgotten about Julian's email, have you? About the arrangements?" "An email?" My brow furrowed. "Email?" I echoed, my voice raspy. "Sarah, my mind. I haven't looked at anything but David's photographs." "Oh, sweetie," she cooed. "Julian sent it out to everyone. Quite a spread, I hear. Just wanted to make sure you saw it. I'll let you go. You call me if you need anything at all." The line clicked dead. A chill, sharper than the spring air, snaked down my spine. Julian. An email for David's funeral? He'd never been one for formalities, not with family. He'd always picked up the phone. I rarely touched the computer, a relic of David's work, gathering dust in his study. But now, a strange compulsion pulled me from my chair. Each step to David's study felt heavy, a pilgrimage. The room was just as he'd left it, the faint scent of old books and his pipe tobacco clinging to the air, a silent sentinel to his memory. I fumbled with the mouse, my hand trembling slightly. The screen blinked to life, a picture of David and me laughing on our 30th anniversary filling the display. I clicked the email icon, the sound loud in the quiet room. The inbox overflowed, but one subject line screamed at me, bold and stark. "David Vance Memorial Service. Important attendance information. Julian." My breath hitched, my heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. I double-clicked. The words hit me like a physical blow, stripping away any last illusion. Due to capacity constraints, it read, cold and formal. And to ensure an exclusive and dignified farewell, confirmed attendance requires a $500 contribution per guest. My vision blurred. $500? For David's funeral? For my presence? The email unfolded, detailing luxury seating, exclusive networking opportunities, media-ready narratives. It wasn't a tribute. It was a corporate event, a spectacle. Sponsored banners hinted at a strategic partnership, with a local media outlet mentioned. Julian wasn't mourning. He was marketing. The very notion that my right to mourn, my 50 years by David's side, was now a transactional matter, a ticket to be purchased, felt like a deliberate erasure. It was a slap, a calculated public humiliation disguised as decorum. I stared at the screen, tears of anger joining the tears of grief. This wasn't just about the money. It was the contempt, the cold, bloodless calculation. The horrifying realization hit me like a wave. The son I'd raised, the boy David adored, had become a stranger, a ghost. My beloved husband's farewell, reduced to a business deal, and I, his widow, was just another cost to be managed. A quiet fury, slow but fierce, began to simmer beneath my grief, hardening my resolve in a way I hadn't felt in decades. It was a cruel price to pay for grief, a revelation that begged a profound question. When family turns their backs on love for profit, what truly remains? The sting of Julian's email lingered, a chilling echo in the silent house, far more painful than any amount of money. It wasn't just the blatant disrespect, the cold, calculating demand for a fee to mourn my own husband. It was the crushing realization that the son David and I had poured our lives into, the boy we'd raised with such hope, had become a stranger, capable of turning grief into a transaction. The betrayal felt like a deep, internal bruise, invisible to the world, but throbbing with every beat of my aching heart. I pulled the blanket tighter around me on the sofa, the once comforting silence of the house now feeling heavy, almost suffocating. My gaze drifted to David's favorite armchair, still perfectly molded from his frequent use, a faint indentation left by his headrest. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, threatening to drown the spark of anger that Julian's email had ignited. I missed his wisdom, his steady presence. He would have known what to do, what to say, how to navigate this unthinkable situation. He'd always been the one to see through the surface, to understand the hidden currents beneath. And suddenly, a memory surfaced, faint at first, then sharper, like a long-forgotten photograph developing in my mind. It was a rainy afternoon, years ago. David, his reading glasses perched on his nose, had been sorting through some old documents in his study. He'd paused, looked up at me, a peculiar expression on his face, a mix of fondness and something unreadable, like a shadow. "Clara," he'd said, his voice softer than usual. "There are things, important things, you should know. Things about Julian, about the business. Not now, but someday, when the time is right. There's a box, up in the attic, a wooden one." He'd tapped his temple, a knowing smile playing on his lips, then changed the subject just as quickly. At the time, I'd dismissed it as one of his playful riddles, another charming eccentricity. But now, in the chilling aftermath of Julian's email, his words returned with an unsettling weight. The attic, a place I rarely ventured, filled with the ghosts of Christmases past and forgotten summers. It was dusty, smelling faintly of cedar and forgotten dreams. My steps on the pull-down ladder creaked, loud in the stillness. Light from the small dormer window cut through the gloom, illuminating dancing motes of dust and casting long, distorted shadows of stacked boxes. I pushed aside old photo albums, moth-eaten blankets, and children's toys, my heart thumping a strange rhythm against my ribs. David's words echoed in my head. A wooden one. My fingers brushed against something solid, hidden beneath a draped sheet. I pulled it back, revealing a simple wooden chest, dark with age, its brass latch tarnished. It wasn't locked. As I ran my hand over the worn surface, a faint tremor ran through me. This was it. This was the box David had spoken of. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken secrets. What had David wanted me to find? Why had he kept it hidden? This wasn't just about Julian's insult anymore. This was about David, about what he knew, what he had tried to tell me. The curiosity, sharp and insistent, began to override the dull ache of grief. I carefully lifted the lid. Inside, neatly stacked, were envelopes tied with string, yellowed newspaper clippings, and several thick, leather-bound notebooks. But what caught my eye immediately, tucked right on top, was a small, elegant box tied with a thin silk ribbon. It felt too light to hold anything substantial, yet I instinctively knew it was important. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the delicate knot. What truth, what warning, had David carefully tucked away, waiting for this moment? The silence in the attic now held a different kind of tension, a quiet hum of revelation on the verge of being exposed. How many secrets, do you think, lie hidden beneath the surface of our closest relationships, waiting for the perfect, devastating moment to be found? My fingers trembled as they unwove the silk ribbon, each knot a tiny barrier to the truth David had hidden. The small wooden box was lighter than it looked, delicate in my grasp. The lid lifted with a soft sigh, revealing not jewels or a locket, but a single folded sheet of aged parchment, its edges softened by time. It was David's handwriting, unmistakable, elegant, familiar. His scent, a faint whisper of pipe tobacco and earth, seemed to rise from the paper, pulling me back to him. I unfolded the parchment, my breath catching in my throat. It was a letter, penned in his steady hand, undated, but feeling as fresh as yesterday's dew. "My dearest Clara," it began, his voice echoing in my mind, as real as if he were beside me. "If you are reading this, I am no longer with you in body, but my spirit remains, always. There are things I need you to know, things I could not speak aloud, for fear of unsettling your beautiful, trusting heart." A wave of profound love, laced with a sharp ache of sorrow, washed over me. He was speaking to me from beyond, a final, intimate confession. He wrote of their shared life, the joy, the challenges, his endless gratitude for my patience and love. He spoke of Julian, of the hopes they'd held for him, the pride in his ambition. But then, the words shifted, subtle at first, like a shadow lengthening across a sunlit room. "Our Julian," David had written, the pen strokes heavier. "He possesses a fire, a drive I admire, but lately I've seen a coldness, a singular focus that troubles me. He measures success in ways I never did, Clara, and I fear he sometimes forgets the foundation upon which that success is built. Our company, our legacy, it means more to him than just the numbers, I hope. But I have seen things, whispers of aggressive maneuvers, unusual dealings that skirt the edges of what is right, what is honest." My eyes scanned the lines again, Julian's sharp suits and even sharper ambition flashing in my mind. David's words, so carefully chosen, now painted a chilling picture. He hadn't just suspected, he knew. My hands clenched, crumpling the letter slightly, then smoothing it out with reverence. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he carried this burden alone? It wasn't just Julian's betrayal I was grappling with now, but a new layer of David's unspoken pain, his quiet struggle to protect us. Even from our own son, the bitterness was a raw taste in my mouth. The letter continued, each sentence tightening the knot in my stomach. "I've had to make adjustments, Clara, to safeguard what is truly ours, what we built from misdirection. It pains me to write this, but it is a necessary truth. My primary concern has always been your security, your peace of mind." and our shared vision for the future. A future built on generosity, not greed. Look deeper into this box, my love. There are other documents, less poetic perhaps, but equally important. They will guide you. They will protect you. They will ensure our true legacy endures beyond any opportunistic interpretations. Opportunistic interpretations. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. David's veiled warnings about Julian's ambition, his misuse of company funds, suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about the funeral fee. This was about everything. Our legacy, my security. My eyes snapped from the letter to the other contents of the wooden chest. Beneath the crumpled parchment, among the neatly tied envelopes and thick, leather-bound notebooks, I saw a folder, thick with legal-looking papers. My breath caught. The will. A revised will. My fingers, no longer trembling, reached for the folder. My gaze swept over the names, the dates, the official seals. David hadn't just been worried. He'd acted. He had foreseen Julian's potential for cold calculation, for turning even grief into a spectacle. He had left me breadcrumbs, a carefully laid trail of truth, ensuring that if ever Julian pushed too far, I would find the means to fight back. The image of Julian's smug face, the email demanding $500, flashed before my eyes, fueling a cold fire in my belly. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was a battle for David's honor, for our life's true meaning. And I was no longer fighting blind. What would you do if the person you trusted most left you a map to expose a hidden betrayal, even from beyond the grave? The light from the attic window faded, but the words from David's letter and the cold weight of the documents in my hands burned brighter than any lamp. I sat amidst the dust and forgotten treasures. The revised will spread on the lid of the wooden box. Its stark, legal language, a stark contrast to David's heartfelt confession. My eyes traced the formal clauses, then darted to the cryptic notes David had scribbled on separate slips of paper. Julian's latest venture. Questionably sourced funds. Legal exposure for the company. Protect Clara. Each phrase was a chisel, chipping away at the image of the son I had held onto. This wasn't just a betrayal of sentiment. It was a betrayal of trust, of legacy, built on a foundation of deceit. David hadn't just been worried. He'd been acting. Hours bled into dawn. I didn't sleep. Instead, I pored over every document, every handwritten note, every formal clause of the will. It was like David was guiding me, explaining things he couldn't in life. He'd meticulously outlined his fears, his suspicions about Julian's aggressive business dealings, his subtle maneuvers to ensure my financial security and the true spirit of his company's legacy remained untouched. The revised will clearly stated that after his passing, all assets and company shares were quietly designated to a charitable trust, one that would fund scholarships for young engineers, mirroring David's own beginnings. Not a penny, not a share. To Julian, who now sought to profit from his father's very funeral. The audacity of it, the cold-blooded calculation, made my stomach churn with a sickening blend of grief and fury. The morning sun, when it finally pierced the attic window, felt less like a gentle awakening and more like a harsh spotlight exposing the truth. My eyes, gritty from sleeplessness, settled on David's final, almost illegible scrawl. Seek out Mr. Sterling. He knows. Mr. Sterling. David's old lawyer. A man with a quiet demeanor but eyes that missed nothing. I remembered him. A tall, wiry man with spectacles perched perpetually on his nose, a kind smile, and an uncanny ability to navigate legal labyrinths. He was the one David had trusted with his deepest secrets. My hands, still trembling slightly, found my old address book. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over Mr. Sterling's number. This was it. The point of no return. Once I made this call, Julian's carefully constructed world would begin to unravel. Was I ready for that? Could I truly dismantle the life of my only son? A flash of Julian's email, demanding payment for David's funeral, hardened my resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about honoring David's true wishes, about protecting the legacy of a man who loved deeply and built with integrity. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Sterling and Associates. How may I help you?" I cleared my throat, my voice feeling strangely distant. "Yes, this is Clara Vance. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling. It's regarding David Vance's estate." A pause. "Mrs. Vance." The voice softened, recognizing the name. "Mr. Sterling has been expecting your call. Can you come in this afternoon?" Expected my call? David must have spoken to him. A small, sad smile touched my lips. Even in death, David was looking out for me. The lawyer's office was understated, a quiet elegance of dark wood and soft lighting, far removed from the sterile corporate image Julian projected. Mr. Sterling rose as I entered, a man in his late 60s, his silver hair neatly combed. His eyes, behind those familiar spectacles, held a gentle sympathy. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a calm murmur. "I am so terribly sorry for your loss. David was a good man, a remarkable man." He gestured to the leather armchair opposite his desk. I sat, the wooden box clutched tightly in my lap. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic. I took a deep breath. "Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice steadying with each word. "I found this in the attic, David's wooden box. I opened it, pushing the revised will and David's handwritten notes across his polished desk. He mentioned you. He said you knew." Mr. Sterling leaned forward, his expression shifting from sympathy to professional gravity as he picked up the will. He slid his spectacles further down his nose, his gaze sharp and focused. "Ah, yes, the revised will." He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the pages with practiced speed. The lines around his mouth tightened slightly as he read David's final instructions, the careful redirection of his fortune, the explicit exclusion of Julian. He then picked up David's personal notes, his brow furrowing deeper as he read the veiled warnings about Julian's dealings. The quiet professionalism in the room intensified, charged now with a new, unspoken tension. He put the documents down, resting his hands on them. His gaze met mine, steady and unwavering. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice low. "David was a very wise man, and exceedingly thorough. This revised will is indeed legitimate, properly executed, and unequivocally legal. Every asset, every share of his company is tied to this charitable trust. Julian will inherit nothing. And these notes," he tapped David's scribbled pages, "they suggest David had very real concerns about Julian's methods, concerns that might well lead to serious scrutiny of Julian's own ventures, should anyone choose to look. A cold satisfaction, like a splinter of ice, formed in my heart. Julian thought he could charge me for my own husband's funeral, turn a sacred farewell into a money-making venture. He had no idea the truth David had meticulously laid bare, a truth that would unravel his entire, carefully constructed world. When justice hangs by a thread woven from betrayal, how far would you go to ensure that thread snaps? The weight of David's revised will felt less like a burden and more like a carefully aimed weapon in my hands. Mr. Sterling, his spectacles reflecting the muted office light, spoke with a calm authority that belied the earthquake he had just unleashed beneath Julian's feet. "Julian, as per this document, stands to inherit nothing, Mrs. Vance. All assets, every share of David's company, are now the foundation of the Vance Charitable Trust." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. "And David's personal notes. They provide a roadmap to Julian's less transparent dealings within the company. This could open a Pandora's box of scrutiny on his current ventures." A strange calm settled over me. The raw grief was still a deep well within, but now a steely resolve had formed, like cold iron. "What Julian did," I said, my voice steady, "demanding payment for his own father's funeral. It was the last straw, Mr. Sterling." the final insult to David's memory. My gaze met his, unwavering. David did not just protect me. He gave me the means to ensure his true legacy, his honor, is preserved. Mr. Sterling nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Indeed, David was a man of immense foresight. He understood the need to secure his vision, to protect what truly mattered to him. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The will must be read, Mrs. Vance. Traditionally, it's done privately, with family, but given Julian's approach to the memorial, perhaps a more public unveiling is warranted. A simultaneous reading, perhaps. A corner of his mouth twitched, a hint of dry humor. The idea, audacious and poetic, resonated deep within me. Julian wanted a spectacle? He would have one. Not the kind he planned, but a reckoning. How do we do it? I asked, a spark igniting in my eyes. How do we ensure Julian's corporate event, his media-ready narrative, becomes his undoing? We spent the next hour meticulously planning, the quiet office transforming into a war room. Mr. Sterling laid out the legal intricacies, the precise timing, the necessary witnesses. We decided the will would be officially read at the local courthouse, a public record, at the exact moment Julian began his grand eulogy at the lavish funeral hall he'd rented. I envisioned it. Julian, standing tall, bathed in the glow of spotlights, delivering his carefully crafted speech about his father's vision and legacy, all while the very foundation of that legacy and his future was being publicly stripped away across town. The injustice of his email, the cold demand for money, now felt like a fuse, lit and burning down to an inevitable, explosive end. This wasn't about vengeance for its own sake, but about the profound imbalance Julian had created, the blatant disrespect for a man who had given him everything. Over the next few days, a strange sense of purpose filled the hollow spaces David had left. I moved through the house with a newfound energy, not the frantic energy of grief, but the quiet hum of strategic intent. Sarah called again, asking about the funeral details. Julian has everything under control, I told her, my voice neutral. He's making sure it's quite an event. I didn't elaborate. She would see soon enough. My focus wasn't on the grand hall or the sponsored banners Julian meticulously planned. It was on the small, quiet room at the courthouse, where the true story of David Vance and his unwavering love for me would finally be told. Julian, meanwhile, remained utterly oblivious. I received another email from his assistant, a polite reminder about the $500 payment, implying my attendance was still pending confirmation. The arrogance of it, the sheer confidence that I, his mother, would simply comply, was breathtaking. He was so consumed by his own ambition, his own carefully constructed image, that he couldn't see the ground shifting beneath his feet. He saw me as a quiet, grieving widow, easily managed, easily dismissed. He saw David's death as an opportunity, a platform for his own ascent. He had no idea David had seen him too, clear as day, and had built a failsafe against his very nature. The day of the funeral arrived, crisp and bright, a cruel irony. I dressed in simple black, not the elaborate mourning Julian expected. My mind was sharp, clear. The grief was still there, a constant ache, but it was now tempered by a cold, quiet strength. I watched the clock, counting down the minutes to the precise moment when Mr. Sterling would begin the public reading. It was an hour before Julian's grand ceremony was set to begin. The thought of it, the meticulous timing, brought a grim satisfaction. Julian would be preparing his grand entrance, his practiced eulogy, completely unaware that his own father had already orchestrated his downfall. A final, poignant gift from David, a silent, powerful protection from the very person he had hoped would carry his name with honor. But what happens when the unraveling begins, and the spotlight meant for glory exposes only shame? The day David's world was meant to close in public splendor dawned with a startling, almost cruel clarity. I woke before the alarm, the early morning light painting stripes across my bedroom floor. Today was the day. Not just for David's formal farewell, but for the unraveling Julian had unknowingly orchestrated with his own cold hand. I chose a simple black dress, one David had always loved, its fabric soft against my skin. No jewels, no ostentatious display. My quiet dignity was my armor. At precisely 9:10, I found myself in the hushed, wood-panelled office of Mr. Sterling. The air was thick with a quiet anticipation that hummed beneath the professional calm. Mr. Sterling, composed as always, adjusted his spectacles, a stack of legal documents neatly placed before him. 3 other individuals sat in silent witness. 2 stern-faced paralegals and a representative from the charitable foundation David had secretly established. This small room, unassuming and sober, was to be the true stage of David's final act, a stark contrast to the grand, gilded hall Julian had secured across town. "We begin," Mr. Sterling announced, his voice clear and resonant, slicing through the stillness. He picked up the heavy parchment, its official seals glinting under the soft light. The last will and testament of David Vance. As he began to read, his words were precise, methodical, outlining David's profound intentions, his unwavering commitment to the engineering scholarships, the environmental initiatives, the community projects. Every asset, every single share of the Vance Corporation, meticulously redirected away from Julian, away from personal gain, towards a legacy of true generosity. The sheer foresight, the meticulous planning David had poured into this, was breathtaking. Meanwhile, across the city, the opulent doors of the Grand Vance Memorial Hall swung open. Sunlight streamed onto plush carpets, reflecting off crystal chandeliers. Julian, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, moved with practiced ease through the murmuring crowd. He greeted prominent figures with firm handshakes, offering polite, somber nods. His publicist, a woman with sharp eyes and a perpetually wired ear, hovered nearby, ensuring every angle, every interaction was picture perfect. Julian glanced at his watch. His big moment was almost here. The eulogy he'd spent days crafting, a narrative of his father's vision that subtly highlighted Julian's own continuation of it, was ready. He was the dutiful son, the shrewd successor, the one holding it all together. He looked every inch the conquering hero, totally oblivious to the ticking time bomb of legal prose being uttered miles away. As Mr. Sterling read the final, damning clauses, the explicit exclusion of Julian, the formal establishment of the trust, a hushed reverence fell over the small office. The fate of an empire, the truth of a family, was being sealed with each word. Just as Mr. Sterling concluded, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor seemed to pass through the air. A phone buzzed, then another. A low, collective hum beginning among the witnesses. A paralegal's eyes widened, a discreet glance exchanged with Mr. Sterling, who remained impassive. The first ripples of the truth were spreading. Julian, stepping onto the elevated podium at the Grand Hall, took a deep, theatrical breath. He adjusted the microphone, a confident smile playing on his lips, already basking in the silent admiration of the room. "My father, David Vance," he began, his voice resonating through the powerful sound system, "was a man of extraordinary vision. A titan of industry, yes, but also a man who understood the importance of..." Just then, a few mobile phones began to vibrate, discreetly at first, then more insistently. A low murmur started to spread through the first few rows. Julian paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. A well-known reporter in the front row abruptly pulled out his phone, his eyes widening as he read something, then quickly typed. The confident smile on Julian's face wavered. Back in Mr. Sterling's office, the paralegal held up a tablet, its screen displaying a breaking news headline, raw and unconfirmed, but unmistakable. Mr. Sterling nodded slowly, a knowing look in his eyes. Julian's grand performance, designed to elevate himself, was instead about to expose his spectacular downfall. My quiet strength solidified. David had delivered his final, most powerful lesson, not with words or a touch, but through the cold, unyielding hand of justice. The spotlight Julian craved was about to expose a truth far harsher than any grief. But what happens when the cameras turn, not on sorrow, but on the shocking revelation of a son's ultimate disinheritance? Julian's voice, a deep, resonant rumble, filled the grand hall, a perfect echo of the man he pretended to be. He stood on the polished oak podium, bathed in the soft glow of spotlights, a sea of somber faces before him. His custom suit was impeccable, his posture rigid with practiced grief. "My father, David Vance," he declared, his voice swelling with manufactured emotion, was a man of extraordinary vision, a titan of industry, yes, but also a man who understood the profound importance of legacy. He paused for effect, his eyes sweeping the room, soaking in the silent admiration. He believed he was in control, that this meticulously planned event was his triumph. In Mr. Sterling's quiet office, the air thickened with a different kind of intensity. The paralegal, a young woman with sharp, alert eyes, held her tablet, its screen a live feed of the breaking news. Her fingers flew, refreshing the page. "Mrs. Vance," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "It's going viral. The courthouse, the public reading. It's everywhere." I watched, a quiet storm brewing inside me as the headline blared across the screen. "Vance estate stuns family. Fortune diverted to charitable trust. Son Julian disinherited." Back at the grand hall, a low murmur began to ripple through the first few rows. It started subtly, like a soft breeze, but then grew into an insistent hum. Julian, mid-sentence about David's unwavering commitment to his family, faltered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He cleared his throat, trying to reclaim the room. "As I was saying, my father instilled in me the values of hard work," but the murmur persisted, punctuated by the sharp clicks of phone cameras, not aimed at him, but at the screens in people's hands. A prominent financial reporter in the third row, her phone glued to her ear, gasped audibly. She hung up, her gaze snapping to Julian, her face a mask of shocked recognition. She wasn't alone. Like a wave, understanding washed over the crowd. Heads swiveled. Whispers became hushed exclamations. "No way! Disinherited? The whole company?" The whispers grew louder, bolder, now laced with a collective gasp of disbelief and outright scandal. Julian, still on the podium, his face turning a sickly shade of grey, watched his perfectly orchestrated audience devolve into chaos. He saw the pointed fingers, the darting eyes, the mobile phones held up, displaying the damning headlines. "What is going on?" he demanded, his voice cracking, the polished veneer finally shattering. "Silence, have some respect." But his words were swallowed by the rising tide of astonished chatter. Someone near the back, braver than the rest, yelled, "Your father's will, Julian! It's been read! You got nothing!" The shouted words ripped through the grand hall like a thunderclap. Julian froze, his eyes wide, vacant. The blood drained from his face, leaving it ashen, starkly illuminated by the glare of the professional cameras that were now, finally, focusing on him. Not for a eulogy, but for a public execution. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The confidence, the practiced charm, evaporated, leaving behind a raw, naked shock. The room, once respectful, now buzzed with 1,000 whispers, 1,000 accusatory glances. The reporters in the front row, sensing blood in the water, rose to their feet, cameras flashing, their relentless shutters echoing the sound of Julian's world crumbling around him. He staggered back from the microphone, nearly tripping over his own feet, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The grand hall, meant to be his coronation, had become his gallows. He saw faces he recognized, investors, colleagues, now staring at him with a mixture of pity and professional disdain. The funeral, this sacred farewell, had become a public spectacle of a far more brutal kind. This was David's final, silent judgment, delivered with the cold precision of legal prose. It was justice, unvarnished and devastating, served up for all to witness. What does it feel like when the spotlight you crave blinds you with the truth? The silence in my garden was a balm, a sacred hush after the unholy clang of Julian's public downfall. The world outside, I knew, was a whirlwind of frantic calls, flashing cameras, and whispered accusations. But here, nestled amongst the vibrant blooms and the gentle rustle of leaves, I found my own quiet sanctuary. I hadn't stayed to watch Julian's carefully constructed world shatter on the podium. The moment I saw the headlines flash on Mr. Sterling's tablet, the raw, public humiliation painting itself across Julian's face in the live feed, I had simply risen. No grand exit, no triumphant smirk, just a quiet, determined turn and a walk away from the chaos he had invited upon himself. Mr. Sterling had offered to drive me home, his eyes holding a profound understanding. I'd simply nodded, my gaze distant, already pulling away from the spectacle. The ride back was a blur, the city sounds fading into a distant hum. All I wanted was the embrace of my own space, a place where David's memory wasn't transactional, where grief could breathe, untainted by greed. Now, hours later, I sat on the old wrought-iron bench David had built for me decades ago, tucked beneath the sprawling branches of our ancient oak. The afternoon sun dappled through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the worn flagstones. A gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying the faint, sweet scent of the honeysuckle that climbed the trellis by the shed. My black dress, the same one I'd worn to Mr. Sterling's office, felt like a second skin, a quiet symbol of both my mourning and my newfound resolve. In my hands, I held a single, unopened letter, its envelope thick with the embossed seal of David's old company. It had arrived this morning, addressed to the Vance family. Julian's last attempt at control, perhaps. A final invitation, or maybe even a summons to his father's staged farewell. It felt light, insignificant now. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun soak into my skin. The images of Julian's face, pale with shock, still flickered behind my eyelids. The son I had raised, the boy who used to bring me handfuls of dandelions from this very garden, had transformed into a stranger. He had traded love for leverage, family for profit, and in doing so, had lost far more than David's inheritance. He had lost his father's true legacy, and in a profound, devastating way, he had lost himself. There was no joy in his public undoing, only a deep, aching sadness for the boy he once was, for the potential that had twisted into something so hollow. The boy who forgot how to love, I whispered, the words barely audible, carried away by the breeze. It was a goodbye not to the man Julian had become, but to the memory of the loving child, now eclipsed by a ruthless businessman. My heart felt heavy, a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. The knot of anger that had tightened in my chest since Julian's outrageous email began to loosen, giving way to a quiet resignation. This wasn't revenge. It was a rectification, a correction of a grievous imbalance David himself had foreseen. My gaze drifted to the rosebush David had planted for me on our first anniversary, its vibrant red blooms defying the chill of the season. He'd always said they reminded him of my spirit, resilient, beautiful, and sometimes a little thorny. I reached out, my fingers tracing a delicate petal, feeling the velvety softness. "You knew, didn't you, my love?" I murmured, addressing the empty air, yet feeling his presence profoundly. "You knew what he was capable of, and you planned for it. You protected me. Always." A tear, warm and unexpected, traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of despair, but of a fierce, enduring love for David and a quiet gratitude for his foresight. He hadn't just left me wealth, he had left me freedom. The freedom from Julian's control, the freedom to define my own future, to honor David's memory on my own terms. The thought of the charitable trust, David's true legacy blooming silently, generously, brought a sense of profound peace. His vision, built on integrity and compassion, would endure, untouched by Julian's mercenary hands. I took a deep breath, the scent of earth and blossoms filling my lungs. The grief for David was still a constant companion, a quiet ache that would never truly leave. But now, it was accompanied by a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a quiet defiance born from betrayal. I was not a victim. I was the keeper of David's true legacy, the guardian of his honor. And in doing so, I had reclaimed my own power, my own self-worth. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, but I felt a warmth spreading through me, a quiet ember of hope. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning again, on my own terms, imbued with the quiet wisdom David had left behind. There would be new paths to walk, new choices to make, unburdened by the expectations or manipulations of others. The painful lessons Julian had inadvertently taught me had forged a stronger Clara, a woman no longer afraid to set boundaries, to assert her rights, to stand firm in her truth. I looked at the unopened envelope in my hand, then at the flourishing garden around me. This was my world now, my true inheritance. With a decisive movement, I tore the envelope in half, then again, letting the pieces flutter to the ground like fallen leaves. They blended with the earth, becoming part of the rich, fertile ground of my new beginning. It was a silent, powerful goodbye to the past, a whispered promise to myself. David was truly at peace, and so, finally, was I. What truly remains when family bonds are tested by betrayal and self-interest? Have you ever had to choose between letting go of what once was and reclaiming your own worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice is important to us. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to join our community and never miss another tale of triumph and transformation.